Hello, welcome to the Career Discovery podcast. On the show today, we'll be learning about our guests' area of expertise, their career journey, and what they wish they'd known when they were just starting out. Thanks so much for watching. We really hope you enjoy the show. Kate, hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time and really excited to take a deep dive into all things doctor. So,
Yeah, me too.
So, how about you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Okay, so my name's Kate. I'm a GP. I've been a fully qualified GP for a couple of years, but I actually started my GP training a long time ago, about 10 years ago, and I've been a doctor for even longer than that. So, yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you. And as this is a podcast, just to get us warmed up, do you like listening to podcasts? And if so, what are your favourite ones right now?
I do like listening to podcasts. At the moment, I'm listening to a podcast with Josh Widdicombe and Rob Beckett, which is called Parenting Hell, which is very funny. It's them talking about being parents, and then they have celebrity guests on and people phone in. It's very, very funny. The other thing that is very amusing at the moment, I'm listening to an Alan Partridge podcast. It's called Alan Partridge from the Oast House, and it's just, if you like Alan Partridge, it's hilarious.
Well, I'll check out the Alan Partridge one. And I must say, even though I don't have children, my sister's got me into the Parenting Hell one, and it's hilarious. So, yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to get into your area of expertise, Kate. And there are so many misconceptions about roles, which is one of the reasons we want to do this podcast. But I'd love you to share what, friends and family who are perhaps outside of the industry think you do all day.
Okay. So, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about general practice. I think that some people think that all we do all day is chat to people, have cups of tea, and if we don't know the answer, we Google it or write to some clever doctors up at the hospital, which is true. We do write to them, but that's not the whole story. And yeah, it's a very busy job. We work very hard, we work very long hours, and get a lot of negative press, unfortunately, at the moment. But that being said, it's still a really good job. I still love it, despite everything. So what do we do all day? Well, shall I talk through a typical day?
Well, how about, let's park that for now. And before we get into that average day, I'd just love it if you could just share with us an overview of the profession that is general practice, and perhaps the difference between general practice in the doctor's setting versus the hospital setting, for example. Sure.
So, everybody has a GP, and most people will have had some interaction with their GP probably at several times, throughout their lives. Whereas I think for most people, if you think of a hospital specialist, I don't know, neurosurgeon, for example, most of us, thankfully, will probably never have cause to see one. Not that they're not lovely people, but whereas everybody has their GP, and most people need them, at periods throughout their lives. And we have to know a little bit about everything. We're not sort of specialists or experts in the same way that maybe a cardiologist is, but we have to know some cardiology, and we have to know when we need to ask a specialist for their advice, or what we can manage without them.
And like you say, I think GPs are part of every community in the country, and I'm guessing in some shape or form throughout the whole world, right?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously the health system works differently in different countries, but I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. So if you had to, I guess, in a couple of lines, sum up what patients, society, communities rely on general practitioners for, how would you summarise that?
I think it's difficult to summarise it succinctly because there are so many different aspects to general practice. I mean, people need us, obviously, if they're unwell. If you're poorly, you're going to ring your doctor. Yeah. And then it's up to us to decide, what treatment you need, where to go from there. Then obviously there's longer term things. So chronic diseases, mental health, all of those kind of things, which, we obviously see all the time, but it's not so, not the urgent sort of things. And then there's administrative stuff. So people need letters, they need help with things, all of that kind of thing. That stuff's a bit less exciting, but it's important. And that's all part of our work. It's a whole range of things, really.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, tell us about the average day or the average week. What does that look like for you?
It looks busy. So I don't work full time. Not many GPs do, because it's such a full on job. If you did do full time, I mean, it's a lot. So I work 3 days a week, and one of those days, typically, I would be the duty doctor. So that's what I'll be doing tomorrow. So a typical day if you're the duty doctor is I get to work a bit before 8 o'clock. First thing to do is to look through all of the blood results that have come into the surgery, sort them out into the important ones and the ones we can file later because they're completely fine. Go through the ones which are red because there's something that needs actioning, and action it, do whatever needs to be done. So that's the first thing. And then the telephone line's open and people start calling up because they need emergent appointment. And so then the next part of this is the tricky bit, is to try and figure out who needs to be seen, right this second, who could actually wait a little bit longer, who doesn't actually need to be seen at all, and how we're going to fit in all of the people who do need to be seen today. And that it can be stressful, and it's it's difficult to get through on the phone because we have a lot of patients, and that can be frustrating. So having spoken, I'll probably speak to the majority of patients first, and then see the ones who need to be seen, depending, how urgently that needs to happen. In reality, it turns into a mixture of still trying to work through the telephone calls and speak to people whilst also seeing people. And then some people might just turn up, or something will happen in the surgery. Somebody will maybe seeing the nurse, for example, and they'll come in and say, actually, can you help with this person's blood pressure? Can you look at this? Whatever, all these things will be going on. So it's a busy, full-on day, and by the end of it, you sometimes feel like you can't make another decision. I get home and I'm like, that's it. Don't ask me anything else. I've got nothing left. But it's also quite fun, because you don't know how this is going to go. You don't know who you're going to see. You don't know. You may have genuine emergencies, and see a lot of people who might be very poorly children. So that's sort of the duty day that we call it. And then a normal day, start at the same time, normally get to work just before 8 o'clock. Again, look through my own blood results, deal with any important ones. Then generally we'll have phone calls. Some of them will be quite urgent, need to speak to a doctor today. Some of them will have been booked several days ago, sometimes even weeks ago. So we call the urgent ones first, decide who needs to be seen, and make a time for them to come down. Then make the other phone calls, which will be your more sort of long-term things. So, somebody's on medication for something, it needs to be changed, or they've got queries about it. You've written to the hospital and they have heard something, haven't heard something, all of those kind of things, the more sort of routine things. So that part of the day is a bit less stressful because these people aren't really poorly. It's not we've got to deal with this now. It's oh, right, okay, I know this patient. I wrote to the hospital, this letter's come back. They've told us to do X, Y, and Z. So now I'm calling them to say, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do. And then we'll have our own appointments that we've booked ourselves, which is sort of a reminder to catch up with people. So say somebody you might have seen at the beginning of the week, you want to know that they're better. And this is where technology has really changed the way we work, because we can text patients. And it's not for everybody, but those kind of things, if you've seen a baby who's unwell, say I see an unwell baby tomorrow, but we decide actually they're poorly, but, give it 24, 48 hours, we think they will be better, parents happy with that. So then the next day, I just send a text saying, how's baby James today? And mum can reply, oh, actually, he's still the same. And I'll say, right, come and see me. That's fine. Or she'll say, he's had a better night. He's fine. And it doesn't take very long. It's convenient for everybody. People don't have to hold. We've got peace of mind because we know we've followed up. And it's really, pre-pandemic, we wouldn't use that sort of software, and it really has changed the way we work. So when we finished all the appointments, it's a mixture of telephone and face-to-face, and also texting people, but also emails. So patients will be sending in emails, and it will be somebody's job on that day to respond to all the emails. But then when finished with all of the appointments for the day, is then the more tedious task of going through all of the letters that you've received. Some of which will be important and interesting. Some will be, this person didn't go to their appointment. Like, okay, well, great. So deal with all of that paperwork, deal with any other results, any tasks. So people will be constantly sending tasks saying, oh, can you update this? Can you do that? Can you write a letter for so-and-so? Can you do this fit note? All of these kind of things, which sort of goes on in the background, but it is also, it's a huge amount of work that doesn't necessarily get seen. So the telephone line closes at 6:00. I routinely wouldn't leave before probably 8:00 on a Tuesday. So it's a long day, and it's a lot of work, but it's interesting.
Yeah, so I'm hearing it's a really long day, and depending on which, whether you're doing the duty day or the normal day, it just sounds as though you've constantly got things coming at you in all directions throughout the day. So the juggling must be enormous, and so I can imagine by the end of the day you've really given it your all. Yeah,
that's right. And some days are not quite as busy as others. Christmas Eve, for example, you'll either have a terrible day because everybody wants to make sure they're going to be well for Christmas, or everybody's so busy doing other things that actually whatever the problem was can wait till after Christmas. And then you think, oh, actually, this is quite a relaxed pace. I wish every day was like this.
Yeah.
It varies.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost, I'm getting the sense that it must almost feel like you're almost going into a battle every day because there's so much going on. And so I can imagine that on a day where it is unusually quiet, you must be thinking, this is really strange. There's something weird going on here.
Yeah, we had to check that the phones haven't broken, which they did break a couple of weeks ago. No one could call in. So, well, this is bizarre and terrible. Yes, and it does feel sometimes, sometimes in the morning before a busy day, because we'll message the other duty doctors and say, right, here we go. It's going to be another busy day. Like, good luck. See you on the other side.
Yeah,
it does feel like that.
Wow. What about those activities or responsibilities that you have that, aren't happening in a typical week, but they, do happen with some regularity throughout the year? Can you speak to any of those?
Sort of emergencies and that sort of thing, or, people collapsing outside the surgery, that kind of thing, or just things.
Yeah, I mean, those both sound like crazy things, but just things that, because the reason I ask people to talk about an average day is because it's very easy to kind of reel off all the very exciting things that are happening, but they might happen less frequently throughout the year. So anything that's kind of, that's really exciting or just doesn't happen very often during the year that if somebody were interested in this profession, it might be good for them to have an awareness of.
Okay, let me think. So obviously there will be emergency scenarios that happen, and luckily they don't happen very often. And when they do, it's very stressful, and yeah, it's exciting, but not in the moment. In the moment, it's very very nerve-wracking, and luckily it doesn't happen very often. Other things that happen not in your average week, well, we'd have things like meetings for various things, which may not happen all the time. They might happen once a month or that kind of thing. So it will be things like safeguarding, so looking out for families who are struggling for whatever reason. Maybe social services are involved, and we'll have a meeting periodically where everyone who can attends the meeting to talk about their patients and updates and that sort of thing. So that's not a daily thing, but those kind of meetings they'll be happening periodically throughout the month. And then there'll be things like training days, teaching sessions, those kind of things, general updates. Sometimes we'll have an afternoon where everybody gets together, and there'll be general updates, there'll be some training, all of those kind of things.
Oh, interesting. And am I right in thinking that, similar to dentistry, a practice is almost run as a business, or but attached to the NHS, or is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a little bit complicated because GPs are their own business. Yes, the money comes from the NHS, but then it's up to the practice how they manage that, and that will also be the job of the partners. And most GP partners will be doctors, but you may also have business managers and all sorts of other people. So where the practice I work for is part of a much larger group, so there's a whole management structure and all sorts of, there's a whole team basically running that side of things, which is great. Especially compared to if you're a smaller practice, and you may not have, you'd have a practice manager, but you may not necessarily have the kind of support that we have where I work. And so it's got to be somebody's job to make sure that the practice runs efficiently. You need somebody who's quite business minded, and takes care of all that sort of thing, because if the business doesn't work, you lose money, and if you're not financially viable, you can't continue, you can't pay your staff. So I'm very glad that is not part of my job currently, but it's really important stuff, and you have to know what you're doing. And there's lots of, the way the funding works is very complicated, so you need people who are on top of it, making sure that we're being paid for all the things we should be paid for, and making money essentially, just so that you can carry on. It's not a profit making thing, but you do have to run a business.
You have to cover your costs. Oh, thank you. So tell us about the things you love most about your work.
I think it's seeing people. So I like people, I like getting to know them. I love children. So it can really, if you're having a stressful day, or you're a bit grumpy, and then a little child comes to see you, maybe they're poorly, maybe they're not, hopefully they're not, and then they'll smile or say something funny, or and you just really cheer you up, and you think, oh, that's why we do this job, because we love people and we want everyone to be better and be healthy, and we want people to to confide in us and tell us things that they worry about. And people, I think it's easy to forget in the current climate where there's a lot of negativity, and there's lots of stuff in the media about how GPs are useless and a waste of space and all this kind of thing. It can really get you down, but actually in reality it's not like that. And I don't think that's the way my patients see me, and most interactions, I'd say, are positive. So every now and again there'll be a grumpy person and they'll complain, and that's really upsetting, but that's not a common occurrence. Most of the time we're doing our best, our patients appreciate it, they know how hard we work. The system's not perfect, and there are lots of things that we would change in an ideal world, but we are doing the best with what we've got. And I think for the most part, people realize that, and that's why it's very rewarding. And obviously it's wonderful when you give some of the treatments and they get better and then they're happy and they want to come and see you again, they trust you, and you build a relationship with people, which, if you're a people sort of person, is obviously great.
And I think not so much my current GP surgery, but if I think about going to the GP when I was a child, I probably had the same doctor or set of doctors, for the whole of my childhood and into early adulthood. And you are building relationships, and you do put such faith and trust in those people. And so I can see how that would be rewarding to be on the other side of that. Yeah, and continuity, it's difficult, because obviously in an ideal world, everyone would see the doctor they want to see when they want to see them. But it's just not possible. It's either who you want to see or when you want to see them. We can't always achieve both. But we work as a team. So if there's somebody who's, registered with me, maybe I know them, but if I don't and someone else knows them, we'll just say, oh, remember Mr. So-and-so, I sent her to hospital last week, this is what happened. So we talk to each other and try and provide that continuity, even if sometimes people will say, oh, I see this doctor and then this one and this one and this one, which can be frustrating. But behind the scenes, we communicate and, we see what other doctors have written in the notes. And so you can sort of get an overview and sort of keep up with people. Yeah, and I can imagine that's almost a trade-off that has to be made, especially in a busy surgery, and probably the priority is having the appointment than, having the appointment with the desired person, which might take a few more weeks, for example. Yeah,
exactly. And you can't offer both unless we all worked 24/7. In which case, I think we'd all quit. Going into battle 3 days a week, okay, but not 7. No, exactly. No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So tell us about the challenges of the work. Now, I think you alluded to a couple of those, but tell us about those challenges.
I think the biggest challenge at the moment is demand, and I think it's multifactorial. Obviously, the pandemic has just really thrown the health service into a bit of a meltdown. There's demand. We can't meet it. The demand for appointments is what it is, and even if it's not so simple as saying, okay, if we appointed 10 more doctors tomorrow, would that meet demand? Not necessarily. I think because there are waiting lists for seeing a hospital specialist are so long, and in the meantime, if someone's waiting for an operation, they need that operation. That's the bottom line. In the meantime, what do you do? So they're trying to manage, look after these patients, when ultimately we know, well, you just need your knee replaced. All I can do is give you painkillers. But I wish I could hurry up the waiting list, but no one can. It's very frustrating, and people are waiting much longer than anyone would like. So that's tough. We're just very busy. It's just the volume of work is enormous, and I think expectations are quite high. We live in a society now where you expect something to be done right this minute. You order something online, it can arrive the next day. So actually, there is this sort of mindset that, well, I've decided I need to see a doctor and it needs to be now. And you think, okay, well, yes, what you're saying is important, but I cannot deal with this today because it can wait until a couple of days down the line. I'm not saying it's not, that I'm not interested or it's not important. We just have to decide. If I give you an appointment today and then a person rings up with their poorly child or an elderly person who's acutely unwell and they don't get the appointment because we've given it to you, that's not good care. And it feels like, that we're sort of being a bit obstructive sometimes, saying, no, I'm not dealing with this today. Like, that has to wait. And, it's not ideal.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, we just deal with everything as soon as we possibly could. But there has to be some resource management, you have to say, actually, some things are more urgent than others. It's not necessarily more important, but that's a lot of our work, and managing people's expectations, because it is important to that person. We just can't necessarily. I can't make your operation happen any sooner. I can't fix the entire health service. I wish I could. So there's a lot of managing expectation and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I can imagine it must be really, really difficult when people are outwardly frustrated if they come into the surgery, especially as there literally is. It's literally beyond the realm of your team's control.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lady did get a bit cross the other day because she said, I've been on the phone, I've been on hold for 20 minutes and I'm feeling poorly. It's not nice if you're unwell to be on the phone for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I completely appreciate that. And I'm sorry that you were on hold for so long. But the reason you were on hold is because there are also thousands of other people also trying to get through who are also poorly. The phone lines are not clogged up with perfectly fine people who are just trying to waste people's time. It's everybody needs to get through. Like, she just didn't see it from that point of view at all. But so some people, they do get grumpy and can be a little bit unreasonable. But on the whole, people are very patient and they do realise and they know that we're not, our receptionists are not just leaving the phone off the hook while they go and have a cup of tea. They are answering the calls as fast as they possibly can. And it breaks my heart when you go to the doctors and you see a little sign on the door or on the notice board that says X amount of people didn't turn up for their appointment last month or something, and that's just really that I can imagine that would be incredibly frustrating when you are having to deal with people who are getting upset but because they had to wait on the phone and so on. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing now about the way we work, doing a lot more telephone triage, so speaking to people first, just finding out, what's the appointment for, like what, does it need to be today? Can I get some information over the phone? Actually, can we deal with this over the phone? Because a lot of things you can, and it suits a lot of people. Before, when all appointments were face-to-face, pre-booked pretty much, well, it depends where you work, but in that scenario, if I was going to see my own GP, you'd have to take, several hours off work because you arrive on time, they might be running late and I run late. So, I completely, I understand that. But, you're taking maybe a couple of hours out of your day if actually your doctor can ring you and say, how are you getting on with your such and such medication? Oh, it's great. Let's continue, or we need to do X, Y, and Z. Do you mind having a blood test? All that kind of thing. If it can be done over the phone, it's brilliant. And because we speak to people so much more, like most people we've already spoken to on the phone, they don't forget the appointment, because if you've spoken to someone half an hour ago and I've said, okay, come down and see me this morning, they don't forget. Whereas if you booked it, 8 weeks ago, you've probably got better. You've got better in that time. They're like, I don't know why I made that doctor's appointment because it's taken so long to get one. Luckily, actually, people not turning up for appointments happens far less the way we're currently working.
Okay, good.
It does still happen, but it's not. It's not such a problem as it used to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. When you think about the work that you do and the work you've done over the last 10 or so years since you've been a doctor, what are you most proud of?
Good question. I think probably the thing I'm most proud of is actually completing my GP training, because it was in May 2020. So it was the start of the pandemic. There was so much uncertainty. We just had no idea, what was going to happen. And it was a terrifying time, really. My dad died in the April of that year. He died in the first wave of COVID.
Oh, sorry.
So I went to the funeral, at a very small funeral, and it was heartbreaking. And then I just had to go back to work, and I just thought, right, well, I've got to finish my training. I've got to qualify. I've just got to do this. There's no other option. I can't just sit around, feeling sorry for myself. Like, I've just got to get this done. And I did. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I was proud of myself that I'd managed to complete my training, because it took me quite a long time to do it because I had children, maternity leave, all that sort of thing. So to finally actually do that, it was a big achievement. Not quite the fanfare that it might have been in other times. We didn't go to the college and have a ceremony or anything like that. It was very much, right, you're done, go get on with it.
Off you go.
Yeah, but it was it.
Yeah,
off you go. Good luck with this, whatever on earth is going to happen now. So it was tough, but it was. I think it was an achievement.
Yeah, that's a massive achievement. And a little later, we'll hear a little bit more about how that works, from, I guess, doing medicine at uni to going on to do the GP training. But yeah, a massive achievement in very, very tough times for those two reasons that you mentioned. So yeah, good job. You should be proud.
Yeah, so I mean, that was a proud moment, but actually I'll tell you about my second proudest moment. It might even eclipse this one. And it was, it's funny because it takes such a long time to become a doctor, and when you're training, you're still a doctor, but people sort of think that you're a student. And my dad never really fully understood this process, I don't think. But one day he had a splinter in his thumb. He's like, "Kate, you're a doctor. Can you get the splinter out of my thumb?" And I did, not because I'm a doctor. I was working on ITU at the time. I was doing, proper medicine. But I got the splinter out of his thumb because I love that sort of thing, and it's not difficult. And he looked at me and said, "You are a real doctor." I thought, this is it. This is what's convinced you now that I'm a proper doctor with getting a splinter out of the other. None of the other stuff that I've done, none of the exams, none of the qualifications. It's not meant a single thing, not a flicker. But now this has convinced you that I am a real doctor. But yeah, fine, okay.
Oh, that's brilliant. It was worth it for that.
It was worth it for that one thumb splinter.
Oh, I love that. I love that example. It's brilliant. Another misconception, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I really want to go back to the beginning now and understand your journey from, a young girl to where you are now. And before we talk about that journey, I'd just love to start with, when you were a young girl, what did you want to do when you were, when you grew up? Did you have an idea at that stage?
I wanted to, when I was quite young, I wanted to drive a train. I thought that would be really exciting. You get to travel all around the place. I thought it was brilliant. I think I had some sort of steam train idea in my head. So that's what I wanted to do for quite a long time. I also thought about being a lawyer, mainly because I'm quite argumentative, but my parents thought that might be a good way to channel my argumentative nature. But then I think probably when I was about 15 or 16, I decided I wanted to study medicine. So my mum's a doctor, so I knew we've got lots of doctors in our family. So it was it's not a particularly exciting story, child from a medical background decides to study medicine. And once you've made that decision, I mean, I think you're quite lucky if you do know at a fairly early age what you want to do, and especially if it's something like medicine. Actually, it's then you just follow. You don't have to do anything. You don't really have to think. You think, well, okay, I'm good at science, so now I'm going to do science. So you do science, you get your exams, the path is pretty set out for you. It's not like, I don't know what I'm going to do now. It's very prescriptive. It's do this exam, then that one, then this one, then that one. And you wind up being a doctor. It's not like, you've got to think, oh my goodness, what shall I do with this? And it was all very straightforward. So it's not a very interesting journey, really.
But when you were looking at your mum, who was practicing at the time, I guess what inspired you to think either, I would really love to do that, or the kinds of things she's doing, I'd love to do those too, or what was the moment when you thought, that's it?
I think so. We'd obviously, in the town where we grew up, we'd obviously bump into people who were her patients, and they'd say, "Oh, it's Dr. Carter, there she is," or they'd say, "That's my doctor." I thought, yeah, this is these people really like and respect her. That she's very important in the community. You know, she knows her patients. That they all speak really highly of her, and yeah, I think that really inspired me. And I knew it was a tough job, obviously, but also rewarding and challenging.
I'm having a vision of again being back to my childhood village where with the surgery, and I always remember there was one very popular female. I guess she was a partner at the surgery, and I still remember her really fondly now, and everybody wanted her as their doctor, and her daughter actually became a doctor, and she's now a doctor at that surgery. So that makes total sense to me. All right, so you decide, right, medicine, and like you say, I am guessing that there are certain A levels you have to do to get into medicine, and then you go into uni to study the medicine. So
it's not it's not particularly difficult. Once you've made that decision, all other decisions are pretty much made for you. Like, you need to do science A levels, you need to get good grades, you need to apply to medical school where you will then study medicine in order to be a doctor. It's not like, okay, you're going to go and study English. What are you going to do next? People just they just tell you what to do next. So from that point of view, it's very straightforward.
Well, you just, like you say, you just got to work really hard and get the grades, which I can't imagine is super easy. But so tell us a bit about the uni and the medicine degree. Like, how long is it? What kind of mix of practical versus theory is it? What does that look like?
Well, things have changed a bit since my day. Such a long time ago now, but the sort of traditional way that things worked was you would go to medical school, probably study for 5 or 6 years. Generally, back in my day, the first couple of years was lectures, sort of all the theory-based stuff, pathology and all that kind of stuff. You didn't meet any patients until the third year, which was then the first clinical year, where you'd be on the wards in the hospital doing various specialties. We did a bit of general practice as well, and then depending on what you're doing, your lectures would, you'd have certain days when you had lectures, and it would be corresponding to whatever. So say you're doing pediatrics, then you'd have all your lectures about pediatrics, learn all about children, and then you'd be on the children's ward seeing children and that sort of thing. Now, I think a lot of medical schools, it's a lot more integrated. So they, you meet patients much earlier on in your sort of medical school career. So things have changed from that point of view. But for the most part, it's a 5 or 6 year degree. There are 4-year programs. So for graduates, so if you've got a degree in something else, usually probably something science-based, then that's the other option, and that's slightly quicker.
And on the traditional path, the 5 or 6 year course, are all of the modules chosen for you, or do you get to choose have any preferences at that early stage?
For the most part, it will be already decided, because there are certain things which you have to cover, and you have to have got your exams in, various different specialties. But from time to time, we would have a block of time, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, where you could choose, I can't remember what the name was. There was an acronym for it, special study module, something like that, where I remember doing one that was, which was history of medicine. So from time to time, there are opportunities to choose something slightly different, something you're particularly interested in. But for the most part, you've got to cover the curriculum essentially. So that's all non-negotiable. Just got to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So you finish up at medical school after a period of years, and then what happens next?
Mm-hmm. So then you have to apply for a job. And again, the system it's all set up. There's choice. You can choose where you want to work and what you want to do. But the next step is what's called the foundation program, which is your first 2 years of being a doctor. The first year of which you only have a provisional license. So you are a doctor, but you're still not quite there. And for those 2 years, most people will do a series of either 4 months or 6 months jobs, and it depends, and it does change. And I'm slightly out of touch with it at the moment these days, but generally you will do medical jobs and surgical jobs. You might do A&E, you might do pediatrics, changing maybe every 4 months for the first 2 years, and that's sort of the foundation of your training. And then you've got to make a decision about what you want to do next. So then you've got to think about specialty training, which you might decide you want to become a surgeon, or you might want to do GP. Whatever it is, that's the point where everyone diverges. But those first 2 years, you have to do. Everybody does.
Yeah. And is that what we would know as a junior doctor at those 2 years?
Yeah. So although the term junior doctor actually it pretty much includes everybody who's not a consultant or a GP. So anywhere in your training, you're still technically a junior doctor, which is sort of a misnomer, really, because it implies that you're junior when actually, you may have been training for 8 or 9 years. You may actually be so close to finishing your training, but you're still technically a junior doctor. But yeah, certainly for those first 2 years, you genuinely are very junior, and it's a very steep learning curve because you learn everything you learn at medical school, which is gearing you up to becoming a doctor. Yeah. But then when you actually start work, you realise, oh right, okay, there's a lot that I don't know. You might know all the theory, but then you think, oh right, well, what do I actually do now? And that's the fun bit.
And that 2 years, would that always be in hospitals?
Mostly. So some people might have opted to do general practice as part of that, or psychiatry might sometimes be in a separate, hospital. But for the most part, you'd spend the majority of your time in a hospital, and sometimes it'd be the same hospital. Sometimes you'll move between ones, in the same area. It just depends what you've chosen, really, and where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you finish your 2 years, and then what do you decide to do next?
Well, it depends if you know what you want to do or not. Some people have had a very clear idea from day one. I know I want to be a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon or something like that. Then if you know that, then okay, so now, right, I'm going to do my surgical training, and off you go. And the training programs tend to be quite long, especially in the UK compared to some other countries in the world. You're looking at several years. I mean, general practice is the shortest; it's a 3-year training program, but others may be 6, 7, 8 years. So it's a long time, and it's a big commitment. And if you don't know, a lot of people don't know. If you're not entirely sure, you may do something slightly more general. So you may choose to do, say, core training, which will be another 3 years in medicine or surgery, something like that. If you know, all right, I want to be a dermatologist, fine, you go straight down that route. But otherwise, you might do more sort of general jobs. And then from after that 3 years, then you decide, oh, right, okay, I want to do A&E now, or whatever it is. But people change their mind, and I changed my mind. I did anaesthetics and ITU, and then at the end of 2 years, decided, no, actually, this isn't going to work. Now I'll do general practice. So it's not a problem if you change your mind, and lots of people do. It's just sometimes the only way of knowing if a specialty is for you is to actually do it, and it's sometimes very different from your preconceived ideas. And it's just with experience that you realise actually. Or you might do a job that you weren't particularly bothered about and suddenly fall in love with it and think, oh wow, this is my calling. I've realised now, actually I want to be, whatever it is, and you maybe completely change your mind. And it happens a lot, and it's perfectly fine.
And I suppose that's one of the good things about that 2 years, because you're working in different departments, you're getting exposure to different departments at that stage, and you can start to figure out, is this for me? Would I like to do more of this? Or not, as the case may be. If you decide after that 2 years that you don't want to do any further study, are you still qualified as a doctor, or what does that mean for those people that think, oh, actually, I'm I don't know, just going to stay as is?
So you are still a doctor at that point, but you are not on the GP or specialist register. So if you stop training, then you're in a non-training job, and they exist, but some people do that for a year, just maybe do maybe do an A&E job or something in a non-training position for a fixed length of time. And, for all sorts of reasons, people do that. If you do that long term, you won't progress. So you'll just be at that level. You won't be on the specialist register. There are things you can do. You can do, some people do aesthetics and that sort of thing, because you are a doctor, so you can, set up your own business and do that sort of thing. You won't ever become a consultant or become a GP, and you won't ever be on the specialist register unless you carry on and do more training.
So really the path is the 4, 5 or 6 years at medical school, and then the 2 years of training, and then really the specialism training, which sounds like the kind of the minimum option there is around 3 years or so.
So the quickest you could possibly do it is actually I did do it pretty quickly. Leave school at 18, do 5 years of medical school, do your first 2 years, and then if at that point you went straight into general practice, which I didn't do, I did not do this part quickly, then you could have completed your training, be a GP, and that's the quickest possible route that you could do. For a lot of people, though, you end up taking a lot more time, which is fine, because you realise when you've completed your training and you suddenly are, the boss, what you get is a lot of responsibility and a lot more hard work. So actually, you sort of feel like this is what we've been working towards for years, and then you get there and you think, we didn't know how good we had it. Now the buck stops with you, and the responsibility is all yours. And you think, probably could have strung it out a bit longer.
So like you said, it's a big commitment. And do you find that if you think about your peers who either perhaps were at medical school with you, or on that 2 years, or on the specialism routes, did they all go right through to the end, or did some of them fall off along the way?
A couple of people changed their minds and decided they didn't want to be doctors anymore. Some went into different jobs. For the majority, we're all still doing medicine. So there were a few people who did change their mind, or to go and do something different. But most of us, most of my friends from medical school, we're all still doctors.
Well, and I think it speaks to the figuring out what you want to do early enough, so you are, I guess, on that ready-made trajectory that's there for you. And like you say, if you work hard, if you get the grades, then that the path is there for you to follow. And so that's really helpful, I think. Okay, thank you.
If you don't know, but you're good at science, then you can always, if you do a science degree first, that's still going to set you up, because you could then say, okay, now I want to study medicine. And that's another very, good route into it, because not everybody knows what they want to do when they're, choosing their GCSEs. And I think if you do know, then you're quite lucky.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, that won't be the case, and it's quite daunting when you've got all of these options. You know, how do you decide?
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and like you say, it's good that there is that that conversion course available for people that may have decided a bit later. Yeah, great. Thank you. I think that then takes us to now. So you completed your GP training, and that was a couple of years ago.
That was a couple of years ago, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, the GP training, does that happen in the hospital setting or in a surgery setting?
So it's a bit of both. And it's another thing that's changing. It's changed since my time, and I'm sure it will change again. But yeah, in those 3 years, you do a series of hospital jobs. And then the way it worked for me is I think I did a 6-month hospital job, 6 months in general practice, and then 3-4 month hospital jobs. And then the final year was in general practice. And it's slightly different now, and it's slightly different, I think, depending on, where you are, and they're constantly changing it. So, but essentially, it's going to be something like half your time spent in general practice and half of it doing hospital jobs.
Yeah. And actually, we probably should just clarify for the audience that 2 years and then the specialist training. I'm guessing you are able to earn a living at that point, versus at medical school where it's pure study, right?
Exactly, and
you're like paid.
So much confusion around this. Yeah. So once you finish medical school, you are a doctor, and then you start work, but you are either a junior doctor or a trainee, and these terms are quite confusing because it sort of implies that you're a student, which you're not. You are still in training, and it's very difficult to find a good analogy. I can't really think of another profession where it works like this. So it's very difficult to explain to people, and it's very confusing. But yes, so you are working, you have a job, you get paid, which is obviously very important. So that's how it works. And generally, you're all paid pretty much the same. So the salary is what it is for that year of the training program. It's not like, okay, you're doing 4 months of cardiology, you get loads more money, or you're all pretty much paid the same. It's not like there's these sort of golden jobs where it's it's different. It's all pretty much comparable.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, so then you've completed your GP training. So then what happens? I'm guessing you have to get a job in a surgery.
You have to get a job. In a surgery. So you can. There's some different types of GPs. So you can be what's called a salaried doctor, which is what I am. So I'm an employee. I'm not a partner. But partners and salaried doctors, we're all GPs. It's just whether you are part of the business side of things. So you've got to make that decision. Some people will decide they want to be a partner straight away, apply for a partnership. Some people might do locum work, which is where you're not employed by a specific practice, you're self-employed. You may work for lots of different practices. You may go, to all sorts of places, or you may stick to the same few. And for various reasons, people may do this at some point in their career. So there are options. So you have to apply for a job, send your CV to a practice. The way it works most of the time is most people's first job is somewhere where they were a registrar. So when they were training, that was the practice they were at. A lot of people stay, and that's what I did initially. And then for whatever reason, you might decide to move on, go somewhere different. You might move, all sorts of things. But the good thing is, whichever way you do it, there are jobs. So there is not a problem finding a job. You do not have to worry about that. You will find a job.
Okay, good. And if somebody, I don't know, particularly loved the hospital setting, are there opportunities for people who've completed the GP specialism training within the hospital setting?
Yeah, there are. And that sort of thing is really, really great, because sometimes you know, if you're getting a bit ground down by your day-to-day work, and actually if you do one afternoon a week or whatever it is, you know, some people work as a GP in A&E, that sort of thing. If you have a special interest, something like dermatology, gynecology, that sort of thing. So you can do extra qualifications, and you can do extra clinics. There's all sorts of opportunities, and that's one of the brilliant things about general practice is you've got your core work, that is what it is. But if you've got something else that you want to do, you can work flexibly. So you can do, you know, a day of whatever it is that really interests you and really sort of, you know, whatever it is that's really exciting. You can do that, and a change is really good when you're starting to get a bit ground down. If you're then doing something different, it's just really really good, and there are so many opportunities. So yeah, absolutely, you can make your career pretty much whatever you want it to be. People do teaching, so I like teaching, and there are all sorts of things which are just different from your day-to-day work, but it's still being a doctor, it's still using all of your skills. Just changes things up a bit.
Yeah, that sounds great. Like once you've got your foundations, you can choose different paths and keep adding things if you want. So that sounds great. Thank you. Okay, when you look back at your career journey from, you know, deciding you wanted to be a doctor to now, you know, what would you call out as the high of that journey?
Oh, well, we had a lot of fun at medical school. You know, we worked hard, but we played hard as well. And they really were really fun years because it's exciting, it's interesting, but you don't have any responsibility, and you don't really realise. It's like when people say, "Oh, your school days are the best days of your life," and you think, "Well, they don't seem that great."
Yeah.
But actually, you know, it really was like that because you were doing all of these cool things and meeting all these inspirational people, but also having loads of fun. You didn't have any responsibility. That it was great. And being a junior doctor was a bit like that to a certain extent. Yes, you had responsibility and, you know, important things you needed to do, but you also, you know, I worked with really great people in a lovely hospital. You know, we had loads of fun, and you had your team, and, you know, you go out together, and, you know, it was just really, you know, we didn't really have any responsibility. Those years were really, really great.
They sound good fun. And I can imagine that, you know, if I think about the medics who were at my uni, it was just a different level of intensity, their course, compared with mine, which was very light in comparison. And you know, the things that they were seeing day to day were, again, a lot more deeper than I was experiencing in my course. And I can imagine, you know, often we bond, don't we, in tough times and challenging times. And I can imagine you came out of that experience with great friendships.
Yeah, that's right. Because it is quite intense. And it's very exam heavy. So anyone thinking about going into medicine, you will be doing exams for not quite the rest of your life, but I have now finished. So how many years down the line I've done the last compulsory exam that I have to do. And that was 2 years ago. So there are just exams after exams after exams. And once you've done all the compulsory ones, then you can do the optional ones. So if you're the sort of person who hates exams, you need to think really carefully about whether medicine's for you, because you cannot get away from them. They will just keep on coming. And once you start work, you have to pay for them as well. So it's a bit of a double whammy. So you've got to be prepared.
To pay for the privilege.
Just doing exams for years and years and years. And then you can finally stop doing them.
That's a good good tip. Okay. All right. So looking back at that career journey again, talk to us about, I guess, the toughest thing, perhaps a really challenging time or a failure you had to overcome, or perhaps even some limiting beliefs that you had to overcome.
So I'll continue on the theme of exams. the postgraduate exams are hard. They're all hard, especially the anaesthetic exams. I found them incredibly difficult, and I just repeatedly failed them. And the problem is then your confidence takes a knock, and there's a lot of mind games that you sort of play with yourself, thinking, oh, I can't do this. I'm not going to pass this exam. And once you start thinking like that, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then you fail, and then you're in this sort of cycle of failure. I can't called it once. You don't want to get into the cycle of failure, and that was really tough because you're working, you're revising in all of your free time, because it's not like medical school. There's no study leave. It's not like, when you had your A levels and you had how many weeks off just to revise. That's all you had to do. You're also holding down a job. You might also have a family. You've got all your whole life. And you're studying for this exam, which is important, compulsory, and also very expensive. So there's a lot of pressure there, because you think to yourself, well, this exam cost me 400 quid. If I have to do it again, it's so painful. So that aspect of things,
the stakes are higher.
Is really tough. The stakes are higher, even if you want to pass, because obviously you want to pass the exam because that's what you want to do. But also you're thinking to yourself, how many times am I going to have to pay for this horrible exam? So that's tough. The other thing I found really tough was working nights. I just don't like it. There's something about 4 o'clock in the morning that I just never want to see it. It's just, I found it really miserable and really lonely.
Unless you're going on holiday.
In the daytime. Yeah, exactly. That's the only time I want to see 4 o'clock in the morning. But during the daytime, the hospital is full of people. You've got your whole team. There's lots of you. You can always ask for help. It's mostly pretty fun. But then at nighttime, it might just be you and one other person, or the boss might be at home and you can call them. But should you call them? I just found it really, just really lonely and really hard. And I felt like I had all of this responsibility and it was all down to me. And it actually wasn't. But that's how it felt. I just hated it. So that's when I realised I need to do a specialty where you don't have to work nights. And you can in general practice, but you don't have to. And some people love it. Some people are like, oh, it's so exciting to be in the hospital at 3 a.m. and what's going to happen. But and if that's your type of personality, then I'll sit you down to the ground. But I just absolutely hated it.
And I guess that's the beauty of the profession. There is choice, and if that's not for you, that's okay. What did you learn about that exam, failing the exam, and how did you obviously you did pass it, so what did you learn after that experience?
I think a lot of it was about confidence, and just because you failed an exam, and if you're the sort of person, I think a lot of us are sort of type A personalities, we're used to getting an A star, getting 82%, passing the exams. This might be the first time in your life that you failed something, and it feels awful. You think, oh, I must be the stupidest doctor who's ever lived. And actually, that's not the case at all. Loads of people have failed an exam, and they're important, they're difficult, it's very stressful. It doesn't mean that you're a bad doctor or an idiot. Maybe you had a bad day, maybe it was down to luck. Sometimes the pass mark, one exam I failed by less than 1%. So if it just come down to one part of the question, if I got that right. But once you start thinking, oh, well, I'll torture myself with that for a while, that's not helpful. You just have to say, right, okay, well, that was a disappointment. I'll feel sorry for myself for a little while. Now, what am I going to do? Will I resit it as soon as possible? Am I going to say, no, I'm going to give myself 6 months, really work really, really hard to make sure that there's no way I'm going to fail this. Talk to other people and find out what strategies they use. Because if you're revising in a way that's inefficient, it doesn't matter how many hours you spend doing it. If you haven't actually understood it, or if you're not working efficiently, and different styles suit different people. So, you have to learn what works for you. Then do the exam again and crush it.
Yeah, I think that there's an expression, worrying is a waste of time. And what you just said really speaks to that, because, yeah, you could have just worried about it, but actually you'd have been wasting that time instead of focusing that time on revising. So, yeah. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting is I read a book, the book called, I think it's called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and it talks about the fixed versus growth mindset. And one of the things she talks about in her book is often we don't learn how to learn, and there is a technique to learning. And it's not just about memory. There are methods to learn how to learn, and like you say, if you're not learning in the right way, then it could be a waste of time anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I need to read that book, because it took me so long to realise that, the way I was revising was so inefficient. Like, I've got a very good memory, so remembering things is not an issue. But by writing things out hundreds and hundreds of times, you might remember it. If you haven't fully understood it, then when you look at the exam question, you're still no better off. And I wish I'd known that about 15 years ago. But yeah, no, that sounds like a useful book.
Yeah, it's a good book. I'll link to it in the show notes and send you a copy. Okay, Kate, can you just talk to us about the importance of role models and mentors on your career journey? Yeah,
I think having mentors or people who've inspired you throughout your career. I mean, I don't think you could do it without them. Because if there isn't somebody who you think, I want to be like you, this is what I want. I want your career. I want to be as good at my job as you are. Because if you didn't have people like that, you just think, well, what am I doing this job for? If there's no one who inspires you, it's hard work. It takes a long time. There are lots of challenges. If you didn't have somebody saying, you know what, I failed an exam once. And guess what? I'm now the professor of such and such, and everyone listens to what I say. You think, okay, yes, like just because I had a little bit of a hiccup does not mean I'm a total failure. Everybody has something that didn't go quite right all of the time, and you have to have people you can look up to and think, yeah, actually, you are brilliant, and I want to do what you're doing.
Yeah, crucial, aren't they? I think really, really critical. Kate, we've talked about the education and training that's required to become a doctor and a GP, and I think that is quite set. And you've mentioned that there is another route available, which is this conversion opportunity. But I'd really love to hear from you what I guess you might call them softer skills you feel are important for people to be successful in this profession.
Okay. So I think for most doctors, general practice, definitely, you have to be the sort of person who likes other people, because that is the majority of your work, will be seeing and speaking to people. So if you're not a people person, it maybe is not going to be the right career for you. You can definitely be the kind of doctor who doesn't necessarily have all those sort of interactions all the time. But for general practice, you have to be the sort of person who is interested in people, genuinely, wants to learn more about them, and wants to, spend time with people. And you need to be able to show empathy. So you need to be able to build rapport with people, because you can learn all these things at medical school, and you learn about communication skills, consultation skills. But if you don't mean it, that will come across, people aren't stupid. If you're just saying, oh gosh, that must be very hard for you, and it just sounds like you're reading off a script. Whereas people know when you say, that's terrible. A similar thing happened to me, or maybe you wouldn't say that, but that sort of thing. People know when you're genuinely listening and when you genuinely care about what they have to say. And so I think that's really important. If you don't have those kind of skills, you can learn it to a certain extent. But I think those kind of things you have to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels like it would be impossible to do the job if I don't. Not only would it make you a I don't know, not that you're not great at what you do if you don't show empathy or people skills or a desire to help people, but I can imagine you would be very unhappy as well if you were constantly having to put yourself in a situation where you weren't naturally using those skills. My sister's a nurse, and she always talks about the amazing doctors that she works with who have that great bedside manner, and it's the I guess that's what we might think of as those things that you described, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you didn't have genuine interactions that meant something, I don't know where your reward would come from, because the job is hard, and if it's just sort of relentless and you're not getting anything back, I don't know how you carry on, really, because it's those kind of interactions which make you think, okay, this is worthwhile. Like, I do know what I'm doing. I am good at my job, and people do appreciate it. It is worth it. I'll come back again tomorrow. I don't know how you would. You'd probably be in the wrong job if you couldn't stand people and just didn't care.
Yeah. I can't remember who talks about this, but they talk about the importance of knowing your why, knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and the importance of that is obviously so you can do great work, but also when there are challenges and tough times, of which there will be many throughout a career, if you can go back to your why, it reminds you why you're doing what you're doing. And like you say, that's the kind of the positive feedback you're getting, isn't it? This is why I'm doing this. And
and some of our work, obviously it will be, someone's got an infection, they need antibiotics and they get better, fine. But there's a lot of things which actually you maybe you can't solve somebody's problems, and maybe they're not expecting you to, but they would come and say, look, all of these things are happening, this and this and this and this, and you think, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? But actually, sometimes you just have to think it's not possible, and I am not going to be able to take away all these things that have happened, but I can listen. And sometimes that is actually what people want or what they need. Sometimes you say, well, I actually haven't done anything for you. But the patient might say, well, but I felt that you listened, and that's actually all I needed. And that's very, very valuable. And you do have to sometimes just think we're not always about problem solving and like, what medicine do you need? Sometimes it's not about that.
Yeah. Kate, can I ask you about, I can imagine in a role where empathy is so important, it might be easy to blur those boundaries and end up becoming very emotionally involved or finding it hard to have that boundary between the work and home and taking that home with you. Is that something that they teach you at medical school? How does that work?
I don't recall learning that at medical school. I think they probably try to set you up for that sort of thing as best they can, but nothing really prepares you for it until you're doing it. And it can be difficult, because if you empathize with somebody and you know them really well and you really like them, and how do you not get emotionally invested? Sometimes you can't help it. But as long as you can recognize it, then, that's okay, because we are human, and sometimes you will be really deeply affected by something. And sometimes a patient will say something that just really resonates with you, and you think, oh my God, I think I'm going to cry. And actually, sometimes it is okay to blur those lines, and your patients realize, well, you are also a human being. You also have, a family. You may have health problems. Like, we're not robots, and people don't tend to mind if, in certain scenarios you might actually, you might share something about yourself, or, you might say, I was in that situation too, and it was awful. And And yeah, I think that there are certain scenarios where that's okay. You cannot be so emotionally invested in everybody that that you can't switch off, or you can't go home without thinking, oh my goodness, I better triple check that I've done that, because it's not sustainable. You can't survive in general practice if you are going to be constantly overthinking things, or you have to find a way to not do that, because otherwise you'll just burn out. It's not possible.
I can imagine that would be really tough. Oh, thank you. Okay, as we move towards actually, I was going to ask you about what does the future hold for the profession, but I feel like we've had a good conversation around that, where we touched on the pandemic. And I think that most people who went to the doctors during that time would have experienced the changes and things that were put in place to allow us to still seek help as patients. But in addition to the software that you mentioned, sending texts to the patients since the pandemic, are there any other things that have stayed since that time that you feel that will be helpful for the practice and the profession going forward?
I think things like, so now most surgeries will have an app, and the hospital will have one too. Some it's the same one, quite often it's not, where people can see their results and things. It's a double-edged sword, because sometimes if information is then uploaded onto the app that hasn't been seen by a clinician, you get this scenario whereby the patient has got this information but isn't entirely sure what it means, and maybe it's come with an exclamation mark next to it. So they think, oh my goodness, are my kidneys failing? And you think, no, it's just this particular thing. The computer has said it's outside the normal range, but you are not imminently going to be, drop dead. It's okay. But it means that because people have access to that information, they get it quickly. You can have access to letters, all of that kind of thing, which is for the most part good. And that's just going to carry on, I think.
Because obviously a hugely challenging time for the whole of the medical profession. But if there are some, I guess, small wins that can come out of that make life more efficient for you guys and better for patients on the other side of it, then that's good. Kate, as we move towards wrapping up, I am really curious about, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out?
That's a difficult one. I think maybe going back to, the way you learn and, different ways of studying, that sort of thing. I wish I'd known that, because it would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of heartache. Yeah, beyond that, I don't know what else I wish I'd known back then. I could say what the job was really like, but
or what do you?
I'm not sure if I told my younger self that.
Or what about, when you think back to that little girl who wanted to be a train driver or thought about being a lawyer, but then landed on medicine, what would you tell her about, going out into the big wide world?
I think I would tell her that it is difficult and it's not going to be plain sailing, but ultimately it's worth it, and that actually you'll be good at it. So if you feel like you've failed and it's all going horribly wrong, actually, ultimately, I think I am good at my job, and it has all been worth it, and the hard work, it does pay off.
Yeah. Great. And I love a quote. Are there any quotes or inspirational expressions that, get you through the tough times that you could share with us?
I think especially at the moment, because there's so much negativity in the press, and every day there's another, article about how, GPs earn hundreds of thousands of pounds, they don't do any work, and they're stupid. And it can really get to you. I try not to read those things, but what I absolutely would say to anyone is don't read the comments on any of these things. Don't read them. Like, actually doesn't matter what it is. Don't read the comments, because there are people on the internet who, normal people who are just living their lives and have had good experiences aren't writing it on the internet. One person who once upon a time, had a bad encounter with their doctor, they are writing it on the internet, and it's just full of people, just spouting all of this negativity, and it's not helpful. You are not going to learn anything, and it's not going to make you feel good about yourself to read any of the comments. So just don't do it. Just don't do it. And the other thing that a colleague who's a really good friend said to me once is, at the end of the day, this is just work. It doesn't define your whole entire life. Like, it is part of your identity, and I think a lot of doctors feel that. But actually, if you're really unhappy, change it. It's just work. We have to work because we need to pay the bills, but we're not, you're not obliged to, be in an unhappy job. If something's not right, change it, because it's just a job. It is not the end of the world. The NHS is not going to crumble because you leave one job and start another one. Like, as important as we all like to think we are, actually, the world will carry on. It's just work.
I think that's two great lessons there. And I've tried, as I've been doing lots of reading around these areas for the last couple of years, and listening to podcasts myself. Often we talk about, we ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I deliberately try to say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because you're right. Your job is not you. You are you, and you happen to do something to earn a living. And if you love that thing and get happiness and fulfillment from that thing, and it helps people, brilliant. But ultimately, you are not your job. You're not just your job. Yeah. Okay. So if just before we kind of close out, if people want to find out more about the profession, where would you point them to?
Yeah, so I did write some things down just in case I forgot. There's lots of useful information. Healthcareers.nhs.uk and Health Education England. You just put that into Google. That will give you information about how to get into medical school. Also, things about the money side of things, because it's important. You need to know, it costs a lot of money, and it talks you through your options and things. BMJ Careers as well has a lot of good information. And I found a website which looked quite helpful called the Medic Portal, and that has lots of resources, sources on how to get into medical school, because there are, guess what, exams that you have to do, and all of that kind of thing is all on this website. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we'll make sure. Well, we'll definitely include the links to all of those great resources. So thank you so much for sharing those. Okay, Kate.
Oh, and the other one, the Royal College of General Practitioners, specifically for general practice and anything you want to know about that, their website has got it all.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. We'll include links to all of those. That's brilliant. Kate, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I've learned so much, and I know that, I've found this really valuable, and I know that the audience are going to find it really valuable too. Before we say goodbye, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Any words of wisdom or encouragement that you'd like to leave them with?
No, I don't think I have any words of wisdom, but despite all the negativity at the moment, and all the doom and gloom, medicine still is a fantastic career, and if that's what you want to do, then go for it, because nothing else is going to fulfill that. If you have a vocation, then you owe it to yourself to take that as far as you can. And I think it's still, it's still worth it.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you gained any value out of today's episode, please help us spread the word by subscribing to the podcast. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, we would love your feedback. Please use the links in the show notes to get in touch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.